I'm joined now by Sky News host, National Affairs Editor at the Daily Telegraph, James Morrow, and Deputy Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs, Daniel Wild. We'll work through all of those headlines and more. We'll start, of course, with the visa system out of Gaza that's working against Australia's interests. Retired senior immigration official Abel Rizvi, and I worked with him many years ago. I think he's a straight shooter, but he's no great supporter of the coalition. He has told The Australian that the Albanese government's use of tourist visa for Gazans was politically driven and almost certainly done against departmental advice. He's a former DepSec. He also said the government was now in a very deep hole with more than 1,300 Palestinians stuck on short-term tourist visas, costing taxpayers millions, while, of course, displacing everyone else in the queue to come here through our refugee program. James, first to you. As I said, straight shooter. I've known him for nearly 30 years. Very senior retired official, telling us that Labor defied decades of precedent doing what they've done this way. I made the point at the top of the show, ASIO too, during this period, was off the NSC, and we had the hapless Andrew Giles in charge. It's getting worse by the day, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's getting really bad. And, you know, as I think you alluded to, they really need this parliamentary break here because they have been losing so much skin during this in question time after question time. And, you know, the big question, again, has to be why? Why do this? Other nations aren't doing anything like this. Arab nations certainly aren't doing anything like that, which, you know, people have to think about as well. And then you look at Abel Rizvi's comments, you know, he's no friend of the coalitions, as you say, but he has called it out. This was political. This was about shoring up seats in Western Sydney and also, I think, about trying to fend off attacks from that green left wing of politics here that is very upset that Labor hasn't completely abandoned Israel. So, you know, the politics are there. The security threat is huge. And I thought what Julian Leeser said there was very interesting. And what Albanese said in response about World War II. And, you know, be generous to people after a war. But Hamas must be defeated before we can do anything around being generous in this regard.
Abel speaks with authority, Daniel, because I worked closely with him in the Howard era in an immigration portfolio. During the very time we took about 4,000 Kosovars out of former Yugoslavia. We kept them here on safe haven visas and, of course, they returned. There was precedent here that Labor chose not to use, notwithstanding what we did in Afghanistan and Syria. I think the point now is we've got 1,500 of them still not here, but granted visas by Labor. Now, surely we either cancel those visas and say, start again, let's go through the process, or say, if you want to come, you must have proper security checks. You must have a face-to-face interview.
Well, absolutely right, Peter. I think it's clear that this is all about politics. It's got nothing to do with national security. This is not the Labor Party that, you know, your parents or my parents or grandparents' generation grew up with. The old Labor Party believed in the social fabric. It believed in the community and integration. But this mass migration program with the Palestinian issue being the tip of the spear is simply not working in the national interest. The other issue you've got here, Peter, is that this government will talk about trust and democracy till the cows come home, but there is a lack of transparency about this. Why were 3,000 tourist visas given to Palestinians coming out of Gaza? And I think the other point to make is, does the Prime Minister actually agree with what I think was an unbelievable statement by the head of ASIO, that rhetorical support for a terrorist organisation would not count against you in terms of your capacity to come into this country? He hasn't answered those questions. And I think most Australians look at that and say, how could it be the case that sympathies or support for rhetoric for an organisation like Hamas apparently is not an issue for getting a visa into this country?
Daniel, in the Abbott era, in the Howard era, if someone had expressed support for Al-Qaeda or Islamic State, that would have been grounds to deport them. How has this changed? And where's the Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus? I mean, ASIO now reports through his portfolio. He's not been put under any pressure to deal with this I think, very concerning statement.
Well, exactly right. I think a part of it is the press gallery either agrees with the position of the government or they're not interested in asking any serious questions about it. I think that the other issue you've got is, as you mentioned, the issues in Western Sydney, or as James mentioned, the issues in Western Sydney and the seats that Labor want to hold on to. I mean, that's the reason why Tony Burke was put into that portfolio. He is there simply to manage what they consider to be a significant electoral challenge facing them in the next election. So I don't think Australians can have any confidence that this cabinet is actually being set up to benefit the national interest. It's being set up in order to give Labor the best chance of holding those seats.